Hello and welcome to my 2025 first quarter review. I'm gonna start doing quarterlies instead of monthlies because it's easier for me and nobody's really messing with the monthly wrap ups like that. So I'm just gonna do it like this. I'm gonna do it how I wanna do it. So just to get right into it, I'm going to be talking about the favorites I read this month. The first one I'm going to be talking about is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I gave this book 5 stars, and like the title says, if other fellow literary fiction readers have recommendations for really good literary fiction, please let me know because I need to be reading more literary fiction. I forgot how much I loved it and how it's my favorite genre until I read this book, so please leave some recommendations in the comments. I'm begging you. Anyway, yes, I gave Intermezzo 5 stars. It is about Peter and Ivan, two brothers that have a pretty significant age difference, and their father recently passed away. And Peter is juggling him, like being the older brother, and how him and his brother are pretty estranged and they really don't get along, while also juggling these two women he has and really cares for and loves in his life. And then Ivan, similarly, is starting a brand new relationship, and things are just kind of getting a little difficult and like complicated for both of the brothers, especially when it comes to them interacting. It's just a really good, well written, touching story. I cried reading it. I do not cry that much, but it had me tearing up. Peter has my heart. Oh my gosh, I don't remember the last time I was so invested in like a cast of characters, and not just one or two, but like literally everybody. It's like, oh my gosh, kept me on my toes. I would want the characters to do something and then they wouldn't, but then it was good for the story. So yeah, Sally Rooney is out here, man. Like, she's writing like crazy. And I've read Normal People by her, and I want to read her other two books, and I liked Normal People. I gave that 4 stars, but Intermezzo is just top tier. And another favorite I read during this quarter was Chain Gang All Stars by Nana Kwame Jebibrenya. I gave this book 5 stars as well. It is a futuristic dystopian tale that is looking at with how our society is currently going, and the prison industrial complex, and how in the dehumanization and a lot of people will turn into a form of entertainment, and very violent, very gory, very bloody entertainment. And it's really challenging the reader to question who and what and why they sympathize for people. So in America especially, we are very conditioned to automatically disregard someone who has committed a crime, especially if they are more violent. I can say I'm one of those people where it's like, depending on what they do, put them under the jail. But that kind of rhetoric doesn't really work when it comes to looking at the humanity of a person. And yeah, the Chain Gang All Stars really challenges the reader to question why, when certain people make mistakes, and yes, these mistakes vary from taking a life to assault and different things like that, but in them getting recompense for their actions, does them being essentially tortured and dehumanized and mistreated really make up for that crime that was committed? And yes, Chain Gang All Stars was just, again, another top tier read. It was so refreshing. In my review, I was like, this is what I'm talking about. This is fiction. So yes, this was another 5-star read and an automatic favorite. And the last favorite I'm going to be talking about is Imago by Octavia E. Butler. I gave this book 5 stars, or I gave this book 5 stars as well, and it is the final book in the Lilith's Brood trilogy. And since it's the final one, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm going to just talk about the first one, Dawn. It is about Lilith, a character who was existing on Earth, and there was this big war that happened that made it essentially inhabitable. Lilith wakes up at the very beginning of the book, and she's in this room, and she's like, I'm pretty sure I'm on an alien spaceship. And the story goes from there. Octavia Butler has become one of my favorite authors in the past year. I've read nearly all of her books. There are just like Wild Seed and Parable of the Talents I haven't read, but besides that, I read Kindred. I have a video about that book coming out soon. So yes, she just is an amazing author, so innovative and like like it's expansive to me. Like she's helped me like more like spread out my imagination a bit and really like test the boundaries of it. And next, I'm going to be talking about my standouts. So, other high rated books that I wouldn't necessarily call a favorite, but they were very, very good and surprisingly good at that. And ironically enough, the first two books are by Sarah Dessen. So, the first one I'm going to be talking about is Just Listen. I gave this book 5 stars. This book is following Annabelle, a girl who is a model, and so are her older sisters, and she's just used to like being pretty and kind of just like being in the background of both like her family and also like her interpersonal like friendships and stuff. And then over the summer, something pretty bad happens that ultimately just ends up with Annabelle being ostracized by her friend, being publicly humiliated and slut shamed by her, and she ends up becoming friends with this kid named Owen, who is brutally honest and has very strong opinions, especially about music. Friendship develops between them, and he causes her to like really look at herself a lot more. And just with this book in particular, the characterization of Annabelle and how everything she's been through, and just her wanting to be more honest and wanting to be able to speak out more, but just like literally feeling like incapable of doing so. There was a scene where she's lying and she's like, "Oh, I'll be right back," and she ends up leaving wherever she is, but she literally like she's essentially like having a panic attack, and she just has to like walk out and like breathe, and she's like, I wish I remember the wording, but it was just the feelings that or the way it was written to describe her feelings, even as she didn't know, was so well done that it really just touched me and stayed with me. And I really wish when I read it when I was younger, I was a little bit more aware of what I was reading, because the quality was very, very good. Just Listen is a very good book. What Happened to Goodbye, also by Sarah Dessen. This one is a bit different. It is about McLean, a character whose parents got divorced, sadly enough, by her mom cheating on her dad, and she has this really difficult relationship with her mom and also with her dad, but she is more empathetic towards her dad. Her dad is a chef, so he moves her around a lot. So McLean is really used to pretending to be someone she's not. She would use like fake names at her old school, but then since she's a senior in high school, she just decides to at least try to be herself, but then she's like realizing like, I kind of don't know who that is. So it really is a really good coming of age story, and I like that she's very intentional. Like there's a guy, or I think there are actually a few guys that like her in the story, but she's very intentional about like knowing what she wants, and that she's like, I really don't want to be in a relationship. Like it's not really something I'm like looking for right now. Another really good top tier story, a really good characterization and introspection, especially for a young character. And once again, when I read them when I was younger, I really wish I was more aware, because I felt like I would be a very different person if I would have better comprehended what was trying to be said and explored through these characters. And then the last standout was The Chaos of Stars by Kirsten White. I gave this book 4.5 stars. It is about Issa, a daughter of Egyptian gods that ends up going to America for a bit after leaving in Egypt because she just wanted to get away from her parents. And she, similar to McLean, ironically, since her father is the god of death, she kind of feels like there's no point in developing too like close personal connections and things, because she's like, everyone's gonna die, what does it matter? But through her friendships, and specifically the guy that like she thinks is cute and very clearly has a crush on her, They are challenging her as to like why she believes that, and it's like, if you really think like that, like you kind of can't ever get close to anybody, despite how these people really want to get close to her. And a really good coming of age story, and there's like a little bit of like tension and mystery and just like kind of a little bit of everything that makes it a really good read. And yeah, I had this book on my TBR for years. That's what I keep finding. All these books I've been wanting to read, and then I finally read them, and they're surprisingly good. And it's just like, I should have read this a long time ago. But yes, those were my standouts. Now I'm going to, unfortunately, my disappointments of the quarter. The first book that was unfortunately a disappointment was Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. I did give this 3.75 stars because the writing is very good. James Baldwin is an insane writer. But I have to say that with this one, the synopsis, it talks about like the young son of a sermon like explores his sexuality, and that isn't really what the book is about, in my opinion. There's a very like maybe short section in the beginning that's about that, but it really goes more into like the father's history and his perspective. I would say that it's more of like a story about like the things people do to make up for, or the things people do to kind of attempt to like fix their mistakes, and like generational trauma, and like the choices how the choices your parents make have an effect on the rest of your family and your children and all those things. And somebody before, I can't remember who, talked about how there are a lot of sermons in this book, and yes, there are a lot of sermons in this book. And in someone who grew up going to church, it was all things that were very familiar sounding to me, but I felt like it was just misleading in what the book was said to be about. Yeah, it really was kind of boring. There wasn't really anything that happened, but it was James Baldwin's writing alone that gave it the rating it has for me. My other disappointment is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. I cannot say his name. I do not know that man's last name. I give that book 3 stars. It is about Eve and her partner Charlie, who like to like renovate houses, and when Charlie like goes to get something, this man and his family knock on the door, and they're like, "Hey, we used to live here. Can we take a look around?" And she ends up letting them, and it is like a horror suspense. And at first it was really intriguing. It had me reading and it had me invested, but then as it started going on, especially more towards the end, it was a disappointment. It felt like, despite the House of Leaves-esqueness of it all, and how like the house was like an entity in itself, and there's all these like really out of this world supernatural things happening. The ending, yes, there is like a bit of a trippy aspect to it, but ultimately I felt like it was pretty limited in how the story had been so far, and then that's just how it ends. And yes, it feels like the main character's lost, and I really do not like that feeling. It fell really flat for me. And I also have a vlog about that if you want to check it out. And then I'm going to be talking about a few books that were out of my comfort zone, but either from their popularity or them just being on my radar for a while, I wanted to read them. So the first book I'm going to be talking about is Gideon the Ninth by Tasmir Murr. Unfortunately, I did only give this book 2.75 stars, but for those that don't know, Gideon the Ninth is about Gideon, an indentured servant who is essentially strong-armed into becoming her planet's, or the Ninth's, necromancer's caliber, which is like a knight for them essentially. And they are going to the first house in the hopes that Harrowheart, the necromancer, will be able to become a lictor, which is like a person of just like really high power. It's like the story and adventure of doing that. And despite the rating, it's not a bad book. I actually really enjoyed it. It was very fun, and the characters were really refreshing and entertaining and witty, but just the gore and the blood and the violence and all those things really were not my speed. It honestly kind of grossed me out a bit. There's a part where there's a character that is sick and she coughs something up, and like the description of what she coughed up was just so gross. I'm like, yeah. And I have to admit, I did not like the ending. I did not like how it ended. And I just don't have any interest in continuing to go, but I'm glad I tried it out. I know Gideon the Ninth and the whole series is super popular, but it's just not for me. Next, something that was out of my comfort zone, I read Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. I gave this book 3 stars. It is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it is also a story about what the world would be like if black people were the one in charge and white people were the ones that were oppressed and discriminated against. And it was very sad. I freaking cried just listening to the audiobook, and I really just I don't like Romeo and Juliet. I don't like any of the retellings. I just don't like tragedies, especially in the case of with Romeo and Juliet and Noughts and Crosses. The characters are always young. They're so young, and it makes me so sad. I'm like, I just don't like tragedies. And then the next books I'm going to be talking about that were out of my comfort zone are like suspense thrillers. I'm honestly trying to get more into them, and I read a lot during this quarter. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is The Riding Retreat by Julia Bartz. I only gave this one 2.5 stars. It is about Alex. And ironically enough, I did this as a buddy read, and my friend's name is also Alex, which is funny. It is about Alex, who is a writer, who gets the opportunity to go to this writing retreat at the mansion of her favorite author, and her friend Ren, who they had like a bit of a falling out, also ends up getting invited, so there's already some tension before that. But slowly but surely at the retreat, things start to like fall out of everyone's control, and me and my friend both thought the book was going to be going in like a more interesting direction than it ultimately ended up going in. It just wasn't it wasn't that, what's the word, it was disappointing in the end. Like, despite all the interesting ideas that were presented to potentially like be what was going on, it was just like the most like boring, ordinary thing that could have been happening, in my opinion. Then I read Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone and Everyone on This Train is a Subject by Benjamin Stevenson. I gave Everyone in My Family Killed Someone 3.5 stars, and I gave Everyone on This Train is a Subject 4.5 stars. Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, oh my gosh, I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, is about Ernest Cunningham, a how to write detective mysteries author, and going to a family reunion where it will be the first time he is seeing his older brother Michael since he snitched on him to the police to get him arrested, but for killing someone. And it's the story of them all going to this mountain, and then eventually people start getting taken out and killed one by one, and Ernest decides to take it upon himself to solve the mystery. And the only reason I got 3.5, despite like how funny and interesting it was, because I like how Ernest talks to the reader, the ending and like the reveal was a little bit too drawn out for me. I knew who it was the whole time. I was like, it's this person, and I was right. But Everyone on This Train is a Subject, 4.5 stars. Way funnier, way more entertaining. I liked how quick and witty not only Ernest was, but like so many of the other characters. It was really funny and really good. I love Ernest I love him. The audiobooks, I listen to the audiobooks. Everybody's accents are so cute. It adds to the experience so much. So if you have it, or if you want to read them, read it either with the audiobook or just listen to the audiobook, because the narrator is very good. The last out of my comfort zone book I'm going to be talking about is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Casamano. I give this book 4 stars, and it is about Finley Donovan, a recently divorced mother of 2 who is drowning, essentially. She is not making enough money. She is dealing with her husband and his annoying fiance, her 2 kids. Her husband just fired her babysitter. She is not meeting her deadline on her books and everything, so she's going through it. And after meeting with her agent at a Panera, a woman nearby hears and misunderstands the conversation and eventually offers Finley $50,000 if she can kill her husband. And the story goes from there. I have to admit that in the beginning, I was kind of having a hard time getting through it because I was like, Finley's going through it a little bit too much. But as it kept going, I was like, okay, this is actually really good and really entertaining. Especially Finley and Vera, their interactions and how they speak with each other was really good. It was a really refreshing story. I think I'm gonna start leaning more into like thrillers and suspenses and stuff. I'm definitely gonna keep going with the Finley Donovan series. So yeah, I'm excited for that. What do I want to read / focus on more in the next quarters? I want to read way more adult books. I don't know how it happened, but YA is like my most read genre. I'm like, I can't have that anymore. Like I said earlier, more literary fiction. If there are anybody who has literary fiction recommendations, please leave them in the comments. My favorite genre, I definitely need to be reading more of it. More of my own TBR, and that's also where the YA problem comes in, because all my TBR, or not all of it, but a lot of it is YA, so I really need to get to that. That is all that I have today. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more of me and hear how good of a singer I am, you can check out my music channel and original music, all in the name of Shy Fighter. Like if you want to like, subscribe if you want to subscribe, comment if you want to comment. I don't know, do whatever you would like to do. Thank you so much again for watching, and I will see you when I see you. Farewell.